Well, let's get you more on that on the international developments. It seems that it is still picking up as far as the conflict is concerned. West Asia, which is witnessing another dangerous escalation in months. It all started with an attack on Iran's Qeshm Island, and it is a key island which is near the Strait of Hormuz. Now, the United States say that it carried out self-defense strikes on Iranian radar and drone control sites, and the U.S. has been claiming that it targeted infrastructure that is linked to Iran's drone operations. Explosions were reported on Key Island near the Strait of Hormuz, and with this, a tense standoff has now taken a very dangerous turn. Let's connect with Srinjoy on this, as these developments that continue despite the talks and the negotiations that has been taking place, well, that would affect the negotiations, won't it? Srinjoy, this escalation in the Gulf and why Qeshm Islands actually matters and why these strikes have been reported again.
This may not be war, but this is certainly a warlike situation, because here is America hitting Iranian positions, Iranian radars, and the Iranians also trying to hit Kuwait and Bahrain, as was earlier planned by the Iranians. Now, this basically means that both sides have struck hard. How does this affect talks? Well, the talks are still going nowhere, despite Pakistan trying to involve itself. What has really happened is that America wants certain things, thinking it has won the war. It has set terms. One, open the Strait of Hormuz, which was open in any case before the war. And two, also hand over the 460 kilograms of enriched uranium. The Iranians say, well, the uranium doesn't come into the negotiations at this point. And the Iranians want the lifting of sanctions and the lifting of the blockade and the return of all the money that has been frozen by the Americans in Western banks. Now, these are things which have very little in common. So as long as there is no common ground, as there appears to be no common ground at this point, there will be these bursts of fighting. And yesterday was a clear example of that. You hit a radar station, you try to hit Kuwait and Bahrain. These are all warlike moments, and it's very likely that more of them will happen in the near future.
So the U.S. has been justifying to say that these are self-defense strikes, as far as the military central command saying that its forces conducted these self-defense strikes on Iran's Qeshm Island and defeated multiple Iranian missiles and drones, as civilian vessels and regional allies in Kuwait and Bahrain have also come under attack. And Kuwait's military saying that its air defense systems intercepted incoming drones and missiles. Meanwhile, Bahrain has been saying that there were warning signs that were activated. In the meantime, let's talk about exactly why this small island near the Strait of Hormuz matters, because it's a very strategic location. As I said, it is near the Strait of Hormuz, and it sits near the entrance of the Strait of Hormuz, the choke point there, which beyond that is the U.S. naval blockade. And then Iran's largest island and key, free trade zone, and it hosts major ports and shipping and logistic facilities as well. So that is why it serves to be a crucial part of Iran's maritime trade network, and this is home to Iranian naval and IRGC facilities, which also enhances Tehran's oversight of Strait of Hormuz shipping lanes. And it is also close to key energy and shipping and military infrastructure. And any escalation around this particular island could impact global oil supply routes, which already it seems that the impact is being witnessed. It is now visible because West Asia is witnessing another dangerous escalation in months. And it all started with an attack on Iran's Qeshm Island. It is a key island near the Strait of Hormuz. And with this development, what we are now learning, the big question is, did actually Iran hit at the targets there? Because Iran says that its missiles and drones successfully struck American bases, and the United States, however, has strongly rejected that very claim. So this is another development that has now been taking place exactly when we speak of downing multiple drones and ensuring that no American personnel or assets were harmed. U.S. has been denying any hits, Srinjoy, on its bases either in Bahrain or Kuwait.
Yes, America says its air defense system worked very well, its anti-missile systems work very well, Patriot or whatever, and they knocked out all the drones and missiles that were coming in. So Iran is saying something, America is saying something else. This is what you call the fog of peace. Now that the two countries are theoretically not at war. But at this point, things are, as you rightly said, in a very dangerous mode. And as far as the world is concerned, well, there are worries because the price of oil after this will shoot up. This will hurt India. This will hurt other Asian countries like China, like Japan, like South Korea. It will also hurt other parts of the world like Western Europe. So this is bad for the world. This is bad for the region. And of course, bad for the people fighting the war. Iran, America, Israel, Gulf countries, all of them will suffer as a result.
Absolutely, because that is the kind of pressure that builds on India as well. And what we know that the frustration with the US president that seems to be, increasing there. And that has been clear on the recent post on Truth Social, which is yet another example of how the president of the United States has been continuously trying to indicate that the deal is imminent. But what is now coming across as a big question is that Iran, did it actually hit the targets? Because US has been denying. Iran, on its part, says, according to reports, that its missiles and drones successfully struck American bases. Now, the United States, which has rejected the claim, and this retaliation is coming at a time when IRGC has been claiming that they struck the U.S. Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain and the U.S. air base in the region with missiles and drones. And this is something which the, U.S. side, the military command, which is the CENTCOM, has been denying any such a retaliation. However, it does mention self-defense strikes that has been now carried out in Qeshm Island. And this has now been reported because on part of United States, the president is demanding that Iran put down in writing that the nuclear concessions that it says will make a part of any preliminary agreement. And this is something, Shinroy, as far as Israel question here is concerned, President Trump does not want Israel also to continue with the strikes on Hezbollah. However, despite that warning, Israel too has been doing the strikes as far as southern Lebanon is concerned. So all of that is happening, and it seems that nobody is hearing out what President Trump has to say.
The Israel-Hezbollah situation actually impacts the situation in Iran, because as far as the Iranians are concerned, the Hezbollah is an ally. Now, what has been happening is the Hezbollah has been attacking parts of northern Israel with their new drones. And these are drones which can evade these anti-drone systems. So as a result, there have been certain strikes, and the Israelis have hit back. They have even hit what they call targeted places in Beirut. Now, Beirut is a capital of a country, the Lebanon's capital, with a huge civil population. Now, this has led to problems with the Iran peace deal, because President Trump is making it very clear to Israel that, look here, you don't hit Lebanon, you don't hit Beirut, because Iran says that any attack on the Hezbollah is also an attack on itself. Now, what happens as a result? As a result, the peace deal gets a little derailed. Now, when the peace deal gets derailed, then you have these isolated cases of fighting. Now, all of this means that the eventual peace agreement, with or without the nuclear dust, will take longer. And that's not what the president wants. That's not what many people want. So the further this whole process is delayed, the more it affects the domestic situation in the United States, and it affects oil prices, affecting all of us.
Oh, for the first time in weeks, we are actually looking at the oil prices going below the $100, barrel per barrel mark. And this now seems to be another escalation that has taken place, given the reports that Iran says that these discussions have been, halted or they have been affected. It is very difficult to see right now where things actually stand. Whether or not the U.S. is advancing in its terms of its goal of trying to bring an agreement to not only limit Iran's nuclear program, but also to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. So the claim that is now coming in from the Iran's Revolutionary Guard, claiming that they struck the U.S. Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain and the U.S. air base in the region with missiles and drones, which the Central Command of U.S. military have been denying all of these allegations. Let's, in the meantime, connect with Akansha on this. So, Akansha, what has now been happening as far as the retaliation on Iran that has been carried out, and it is being rejected on part of the U.S. military command?
Absolutely. Let me take you through claim and the counterclaim. In fact, IRGC has claimed that they struck U.S. Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain and a U.S. airbase in the region with missile and drone. Now, U.S. Central Command has called this false, saying that the truth is that all Iranian attack on the American forces, they have failed. U.S. forces remain vigilant and ready to defend against any unwarranted Iranian aggression. So, claim and the counterclaim coming so far, but U.S. Central Command saying that there was an attack, but that attack failed, and the missiles and drones, they were intercepted. They could not hit the U.S. air bases in Bahrain and also in Kuwait.
All right. Well, these are the developments that has been taking place, a claim versus a counterclaim that is now coming in. And this is also coming at a time when the IRGC has been claiming that the U.S. Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain and the U.S. air base in the region that has been struck by missiles and drones, and that is now clearly being rejected on part of the Central Command of the U.S. military. However, Washington that still maintains that despite clashes between U.S. and Iranian forces, the ceasefire between Washington and Tehran still seems to be holding. So let's, in the meantime, get you exactly another update. What we are now picking up is the U.S. forces seems to have disabled an unladen oil tanker that was attempting to sail towards an Iranian port in the Arabian Gulf on the 2nd of June. So what is being reported on part of U.S. Central Command that it enforced the blockade measures against this Botswana-flagged MT Lexi as it transited international waters towards the Qeshm Island, and the ship's crew ignored repeated warnings, failing to comply with the directions from the U.S. forces multiple times over a 24-hour period. And then a U.S. aircraft ultimately disabled the vessel by firing Hellfire missile into the ship's engine room, preventing the tanker from reaching Iran. Well, this is despite the chokehold on the Strait of Hormuz that continues on part of Iran, and the U.S. naval blockade as well, because there were indications, Shanjoy, that was given by President Trump that once a deal is signed, the naval blockade would be removed. However, we are looking at another escalation there. You know, U.S. continues to implement the blockade of all maritime traffic that seems to be entering or exiting the Iranian ports.
Both sides have actually hardened their positions. And if that is so, the chances of Iran not weaponizing the Strait of Hormuz or the Americans lifting the naval blockade are getting less and less likely. So if that happens, then you would expect these isolated attacks, because there are some ships that would try to go through in any case, and they will be detected by either side, and they will be hit depending on who is going where. So this is to be expected over the next few weeks, unless a peace deal is signed, unless the peace deal is comprehensive. Now both sides have different points of view on this. Who decides whether the 460 kilos of enriched uranium will be handed over or not? The Americans want it. The Iranians don't want to hand it over. So that's the basic problem. The Americans want the Strait of Hormuz not to be weaponized. The Iranians want the blockade to be lifted. Now, who blinks first?
Yeah.
Who decides that these things will happen simultaneously? Then there are Iranian demands for the lifting of sanctions, for the return of money. All of that is on the table. And yet, in all these weeks, nothing is moving.
Well, that is the point there exactly. Then what does it lead to, especially when it comes to this escalation, the conflict, the fragile ceasefire, and of course the oil prices that continue to mount. U.S. forces, what is being said till now, has disabled at least 6 commercial vessels and has redirected 122 as the ceasefire with Iran still continues. However, it's quite weak looking at the current escalation. Srinjoy, for the moment, thank you very much for joining in. Well, those are the updates coming in from the international front. We're going to head into a very short.